Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Serge, and welcome to another episode of Search for the Truth. And our goal is to educate people, empower people with knowledge in order for you guys to get. And today, I'm really excited to have this guest, Miss Sally, with us. We're going to talk about a controversial topic. I believe it is. So, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be in a show that talks about truth.
It's hard these days, right? There's so much confusion.
So confusing.
So today we're going to talk about oxalate, plant toxins. First of all, can you tell us a bit about you, who you are, and how you came about knowing and educating people on this topic?
Yeah, so I'm a public health professional. I got my degree in nutrition from Cornell University, and I've had a career doing things like medical professions education, public health research design, holistic health and integrative medicine. I've worked in communities, and I have been a health geek my whole life and trying to eat well and gardening and all this stuff. And I had no idea, despite all my supposed knowledge, that spinach and almonds and sweet potatoes and Swiss chard can make you miserable and ruin your health, which is what happened to me. Eating too many vegetables wrecked my health and my career. And it turns out that plants make a variety of chemicals, but the one that seems to really be a really sleeper discussion and no one's talking about, and that is actually having direct effects that are really common, is this stuff called oxalate that over time you can literally poison yourself because we're eating it at a level now that's beyond the body's capacity for dealing with it. And you end up with sleep problems and mood issues and osteoporosis and arthritis and achiness and irritability. Like all kinds of stuff starts going wrong. It may even affect your fertility. And these problems that this is causing is down here at the cells are blowing up into problems that are really common now that a lot of people are struggling with, and their doctor's like, well, you're fine. It doesn't show up on tests. And so that's why it's not talked about. And it took a lot of research and working with people for me to get really clear how important this topic is. I've got a book coming out called Toxic Superfoods.
I saw that actually. I saw the preview on Amazon, so I'm excited to get it when it comes out. And my story is a bit about the same, right? I was educated on nutrition, and you should eat your vegetables, your fruits, your nuts. But based on the blood type diet, right? I was supposed to eat all the veggies, all the fresh food. And I got.
Are you an A? Are you an A type?
Yes.
Yeah, we're told we're supposed to be vegetarians. Yes, I tried that. Broke me.
Thought that I got worse like fast. Actually, within a few months, my health declined. It was crazy.
Wow. When was that?
So that was years and years ago when I got into nutrition. And then I find out that my body really likes me for some reason, which I'm not supposed to eat, right? and then I was
except your body doesn't agree with whoever made that one up.
I don't agree with that either. A lot of people don't like that diet. And some time ago, years ago, I was dealing with a skin rash that would never go away. No matter what I do, the skin would never get better. And when I went carnivore, which I cut out all the vegetables, all the fruits, the rash went away within a few weeks. So I was intrigued by why is that? And I came across plant toxins, anti-nutrients, phytic acid, oxalates, right? So let's talk basic. So oxalate is a anti-nutrient, right?
Right, which means it interferes with you accessing nutrients or actually depletes the body of nutrients, which it does, yes.
So those molecules can actually cause deficiencies in the body, but we are told we need to eat your vegetables and your plant food in order to get your nutrition.
Yeah, and I think the modern idea about adding a lot of vegetables is really mostly just a reaction to this crisis we're having with diabetes and obesity, which was a product of this last 50 years of telling us that fat and animal foods are terrible for us. So when he took out the fat and took out the protein, what was left to eat but flour, basically. And people have been living on flour-based pasta and bread and sweets and treats and breakfast cereals because they're labeled low cholesterol, low fat. And what we have now is an international worldwide crisis in diabetes and obesity. It's a disaster. It's been a public health disaster. But instead of admit that we've made a mistake on that advice, we're saying it's your fault for not eating enough vegetables. So if you eat more spinach salads, which have no nutrients in them, we're going to fix your diabetes and obesity problem and you'll stop being fat. You know, it's like the dental industry never admitted that mercury in your teeth wasn't a good idea either. It's not going to be quick that anyone admits that they're wrong about saturated fat and cholesterol. They're actually good nutrients that our body is built to handle. And the stuff that plants make, we're not built to handle. The plants don't want to be eaten. They're designed to ward off and limit predation by insects and all kinds of critters, including funguses and probably us too.
I mean, if you look at the last, I believe it's 4 million years, right? Our ancestors, and we have evolved to eat animal-based diets. So we haven't really.
Well, we were probably invented by the animal-based diet. Like the, you know, it's not a discussion about evolution, but the human brain is a unique brain, and our whole biological cycle is pretty unique in that we give birth to very immature children that need a lot of care. There's a lot of brain growth left happening later. The brain is so important, and running upright's important. So the pelvis can only be so wide for running, so you have to get that big brain out of the pelvis early enough. And there's a long period of brain development afterwards. And there's a tremendous amount of protein and fat needed to build a proper brain and human body and this 100-year longevity that we have. And that's having really high protein, calorie-rich, fat-soluble nutrients with bioavailable minerals help to build sturdy bodies and these big brains and got us to being the humans we are. And we were able to live on hunted animals like the woolly mammoth without fancy shoes, without housing to speak of, without heating and air conditioning. We were really out there living wild and quite robust and tough. And if you really were malnourished, you wouldn't make it out of fetal and childhood development because you didn't have all these crutches, and we didn't have vitamin pills and medicines and all the stuff that we use to prop us up now. So then was the diet that allowed us to become that level of robust, to have long lives and perfect teeth and good development and good disease resistance against infectious disease and really the absence of modern diseases like arthritis and things like that.
That reminds me of the work of Weston Price, right? He did look at those populations who were the healthiest, and everything was animal-based at some degree.
It surprised him. Yeah, it surprised him. I think he claims that he went into the research expecting that a vegetable-based diet would be good for people, and he didn't find that at all. He found all the cultures who were living in their traditional way that he studied. He studied many across the world. And he looked at their dentition and examined their cavities and their face structures and their general mental and social health and well-being and their robustness. And he found that the ones who were healthy and had perfect teeth and not crooked, not crowded, they were eating a lot of animal fats and prioritizing animal fats and animal foods and making sure that pre-pregnant teenagers and young adults were getting organ meats and things. And that was a real pattern that was consistent around the globe. And that really was striking.
It was really amazing, actually. So
because it was real research with actual people. Like, it's so concrete. Your teeth are straight, your teeth are crooked, because it compared the relatives, the cousins and so on, who left these traditional lifestyles and went to live in the city, who are now living on white bread and canned vegetables. And it was just at the very beginning of the use of margarine and stuff when he was doing it. So there was the depleted and foods of modern commerce is what he called them, that don't provide those fat soluble nutrients or minerals in the right quantities. And those people had problems with mental health and teeth and stature and structures and were not nearly as healthy as people who were living on crazy animal foods, high fat.
I mean, it did show that those people, population, will eat, was it 6 to 10 times more fat soluble vitamins, so more fat. And that's something we're missing because we're so afraid of fat today. It's so backward, right?
It's, yeah, I mean, the fat soluble vitamins A, E, K, and D are in animal fats, and
Yeah,
you need them. And there's other nutrients that weren't really well thought of back then, like choline, for example,
yeah.
really essential to brain development in fetal years and even in the first few months of childhood. If you want a good, fully developed brain and full intelligence, you need enough choline in the diet. It also protects the liver health. There's a whole number of roles. But Steve Zeisel, who was chair of the nutrition department at UNC, where I worked and got my graduate degree, did several papers on choline and intelligence and how important. And choline comes from egg yolks. So people got told they couldn't eat eggs back in the 80s, and people have been throwing egg yolks down the drain. Where the egg yolk is like precious human intelligence and liver health, etc., tossed down the drain for 30, 40 years now.
What a tragedy.
Oh,
Good nutrition that we should be eating. Actually, I was reading a book about a guy, a farmer, that he claimed that for the last 30 plus years, he's been living from his farm, from eggs, just eating eggs. And eggs have so much nutrition in it, and there's no anti-nutrients either in it.
right. Well, raw egg whites might destroy a little biotin, so you want to cook your egg whites. But
Yeah.
yeah, other than that, eggs are so digestible. You could give them to a dying 100-year-old. Even, a raw egg yolk might even revive them. It's got such complete and bioavailable, easy to assimilate nutrition. It's one of these kind of little mini cheapo superfoods almost.
It is, exactly. I totally agree with you. So let's get back on the topic of the oxalate. So I want to show
Yeah, my
people,
favorite.
yeah, which is your field. So first of all, I want to show the audience what oxalates look like, right? They look like small crystals or pieces of glass, right? So I'm gonna put a picture on the screen. So this is what I found online. They look like glass, right?
Often, when researchers find deposits in the human body, they describe them like beautiful bits of glass. And even my clients sometimes talk about how bits of glass start showing up under skin, because what's happening here, what you're describing is the building up of what we call the microcrystals, which occur in urine. They become kidney stones if they start clumping together. They occur very frequently in the thyroid gland. A small study found that 85% of the thyroid glands, a couple of them did, if we're over age 50, you have an 85% chance potentially if you scale that up to an estimate of prevalence. And that number used to be 58 back in the 60s, but then in the 80s, it became higher. Not that it's a big enough sample to say for sure, but it's probably indicating that we have higher levels of oxalate in our bodies than we did 60 years ago.
And why is that?
And
Is it
certainly,
because of our diet?
it's got to be because of our diet and the foods that put the amount of oxalate that gets in your body. There's basically three sources of oxalate in your body. The oxalic acid, which isn't a crystal yet, it's just a molecule that's an acid. That's the principal form that then chelates or grabs minerals and starts to become a little salt, they call it. When you've got the acid connected to a mineral, that's a salt. And technically salts dissolve, but calcium grabs oxalate and they really bind tightly, so tightly that it's hard to break it apart. So it's considered insoluble at the normal temperatures and pH of the body. So it takes some serious chemistry to break it up, which the body can generate acids. The immune system can spew acids and break it up. But basically, you're getting oxalate from the oxalic acid part in the plant. So the plants deliver it not just in oxalic acid, though they also have those crystals, only they're different shapes, the ones you showed, because the plants deliberately construct these crystals for lots of reasons. And those crystals are like eating sandpaper. or eating microscopic little toothpicks or little arrows. And that's real irritating if it touches the cells of your mucosal lining of your mouth, stomach, and intestinal tract. That's gritty, difficult. It's also electromagnetic. So it's not just sharp and pointy like glass. It's also glass with electromagnetic charge, which disturbs the structure of membranes. So just even that gritty crystal stuff in your kiwi and so on, you don't absorb that part. That just irritates your gut and messes up the gut. The oxalic acid gets into the bloodstream and can connect with the calcium, magnesium, and iron and so forth, other minerals in your body. And that's when it starts to become crystals. If you get 6 or 8 pairs of the molecules, they form this initial seed crystal. And often that's occurring in areas where you have inflammation, injury, or some kind of tissue recovery or damage going on, because you have cells that are less robust or cell fragments because of turnover. Cells die every day. So you have remnants of cells that are dying either from natural death or just from injury and wear and tear. All day long, you're typing, walking, talking, and you're using up cells and they're wearing out. And if you have remnants of those wearing out cells, these forming crystals tend to stick to those kinds of materials. So they'll idiosyncratically stick in areas of your body where you have heavy use or inflammation or infection or tissue turnover. Capillary beds are areas where the things that we absorb from our food, the nutrients and so on, are pushed into the tissues by high pressure in capillary beds. Well, that also includes the oxalic acid after meals. So there's an 8-hour period or more, maybe even 12, after meals where oxalic acid's passing through the stomach and small intestines and so on and moving into the blood. And so there's a peak between 4 and 6 hours after your meal of the amount of oxalic acid. The highest amount would be about 4 or 6 hours after your meal. So during that time, your tissues are getting more exposure because as it comes through the capillary beds, it's being squeezed out into the tissues. Yep. And then on the other side of the capillary beds, things go back in. But oxalate, has to cross membranes. If it's got a charge, you got to have a way to get it back into the bloodstream or between the cells and so on. So it can get trapped in tissues. It can get trapped, especially in areas of high use, lots of capillary flow, lots of blood flow, lots of tissue turnover, where you're injured or infected. So it can show up anywhere in the body. Over time, oxalate crystals can start collecting in bones because of the calcium being a magnet for oxalate. Calcium and oxalate are drawn to each other. So over time, more and more of it is settling into the bones and the bone marrow. And it's so disruptive and can displace normal tissue that you can almost, it will end up over time, you'll have low blood counts in white cells, for example, or even your red cells. And you won't know why you have perpetually low blood counts. It could be because you've got disruptions in the bone marrow's ability to produce enough blood cells, and also energetic disruptions in the body where you don't have enough energy to keep up with the demands for tissue production.
Wow, so oxalates can really cause a lot of harm in the body. And when I was reading an oxalate, I read that these overgrowth, like candida, can augment or can produce oxalate in the body. Is that really the case?
Could you ask the question again? I wasn't sure I heard what you said.
I read that candida overgrowth
can lead
to a buildup of oxalates.
Not really. Candida hasn't been shown. Funguses produce oxalate. There's plenty of funguses that, like aspergillus. An aspergillus infection definitely produces oxalate in the body. That is well established in the science. You'll see it often. People will breathe in aspergillus, and if they're not healthy, the lungs don't expel it properly. If it sets up an infection, you'll get oxalate crystals there. But it's more that the crystals that are forming in the body are being handled by the immune system. The immune system has a couple of ways to try to wrap up these crystals so they don't interact with tissues and keep harming the tissues, and they hopefully quiet down the irritation that keeps bringing in inflammation. Because as oxalate damages tissues start leaking, the cells leak stuff, and that turns on the inflammation. That tells the immune system there's damage, and it comes in to try to fix it. So in order to quiet all that down, the immune system does a couple of things. One thing it does is the white cells will actually shoot out strands of DNA called nets, and it traps these crystals in these nets, and that's a way of encasing it in dead DNA tissue. So that's an insulation, just like you have to have coating over the wires that connect everything. Otherwise, if you touch the wire, you'd get electric shocks.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what the crystal does. It gives a little electric shocks to cells. So, but if you coat it with the dead DNA, then you insulate it. So another way the body does that, it forms something called granulomas. So the granulomas are living cells that come in and they pack themselves around. They try to eat the crystal, and then that doesn't work. So they gang together and they form a bigger cell called a giant cell that tries to eat the crystal, and that doesn't work. And so more and more the cytokines get sent out and says, come help, and it starts bringing in more and more immune cells, and you build a little sort of tumor around the crystal. And those granulomas are very prone to secondary infections. So infections will sit on top and inside these granulomas. And that's one of the ways I think that oxalates, one of several, that promotes chronic infections that don't clean up and don't respond to treatment very well.
Yeah.
And so this granuloma thing can get out of control, but it's an example of how crystals and oxalates damage to cells turns up the immune system and keeps the immune system very busy trying to keep these guys quiet so that you can have no symptoms. So a lot of this is going on under the radar. You don't have any symptoms for years. You're fine. You're winning blue ribbons in every part of your life and everything's grand until it's not. When you finally wear out all these resources that are keeping you happy, unknowingly, the body's been sacrificing calcium from your bones because you keep losing calcium. It keeps sacrificing resources and energy and putting more and more effort into just dealing with this sort of toxic poisoning that's building up quietly. And then at some point, something happens like a surgery or an accident or a death or a trauma where your body needs extra energy and resources to cope with the stress and trauma or the recovery from the stress and trauma, and it doesn't have it anymore. Like it's been slowly using up the reserves, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you're suddenly sick. And nobody can explain why, and they can't find what's wrong with you. And you go to doctor, and they don't have any clue that it's been your almonds, your potatoes, your French fries, your peanut butter, your buckwheat, whatever it is that's been your oxalate foods in your life. So there's a unique pattern of which foods were your favorite go-to. Some people, it's just Halloween candy, enough chocolate and peanuts and nuts and Halloween candy. But, and then there's a unique pattern of how it's affecting you because of your lifestyle, your genetics, your degree of nutrition, and so on, and how well your gut avoids collecting it versus a leaky gut. You get much higher rates of absorption. It's supposed to only be 10 to 15%. But if you have leaky gut, you could be absorbing 4, 5, 6 times that amount. And that's that turns it toxic right there. So if you have celiac disease, inflammatory bowel disease, even, IBS, which is often, I think IBS is often a product of too many legumes and lectins, which are another plant toxin. And if you're eating both high lectin, high oxalate diet, and if you're doing something dumb like I did, I used to slow cook my beans when I was a vegan.
Yeah.
Disaster. That created my IBS in 1990. I did that, for like a year and a half. I was slow cooking beans overnight and then eating them for breakfast as a healthy vegan diet. I'd go off to work and I would teach people how to eat while I was ruining my health, eating the way I taught people to eat. It's embarrassing.
That's crazy. You've come a long way for sure. And I think from my experience, I would like your opinion on this as well. That may be why people who go carnivore, for example, I've had people like my parents, and they have asthma, or Crohn's disease, or cancer, and they could reverse those conditions by going carnivore. And this is something they said not to do.
Yeah, carnivore is basically just eating meat and giving up all the grains and vegetables for the most part. Eat a little salt and pepper and water and meat. And of course, carnivore, honestly, is any diet that's more than 70 or about 70% meat or more. So there's all these different layers of carnivore. When people say carnivore, often they mean the strict carnivore that's like salt, beef, and water. But anybody, and this is an important point too. I added meat after I quit being a vegan, but I added sweet potatoes to get rid of my gluten and get rid of my beans. I was eating sweet potatoes and Swiss chard more. And so it didn't fix anything just to add some meat. So it's not the meat is the magic, other than that meat is easy to digest and is loaded with nutrients. And it builds muscle because it's such a good source of protein. It's that you also have to take out the right plant toxins. And with carnivore, if you really cut the plants honestly, you will prevent so much stress that the plant toxins are causing and the fiber is causing. I mean, those of us with a long history of IBS and other digestive problems end up on the carnivore diet because it's the only way to make the colon behave the way it's supposed to behave.
Amen to that, exactly. We're supposed to eat meat, your body's meant to do that. But when
people don't realize that, they think it's so bad for them. They're so afraid of fat and meat, and they think, oh, it destroys the planet, which is all wrong.
It's all wrong. Yes, we know that's not the case. That's another topic for another day. Maybe this is a big topic.
Yeah, I love that topic too. I had a agricultural grant in 2004 to help cancer patients and other people who needed good nutrition find local meats and from local farmers. So I've been doing that, trying to resource quality grass-fed, transparent, small farm production meats, especially for patients who are trying to get well for a very long time.
That's a good point. I think it's really important to go and find the local farmers to make sure the meat that you get it's hormone-free, antibiotic-free, all the chemical-free, it's the good quality meat. And that's an argument that people tell me when they go carnivore, they sometimes they feel a bit sick because they use good low-quality meat. So that's really important to emphasize that.
Yeah, and one of my biggest concerns about grocery store meat is that it's sitting on styrofoam, and I really don't like styrene. I don't like the little plastic diapers, and I don't like the styrofoam tray. So if you can buy it shrink wrapped in little packages, like the Walmart organic ground beef is that way, that's better than if it's been sitting on styrofoam. And you can ask butchers to cut you a fresh piece and wrap it in butcher paper and not do the styrofoam thing. So if you haven't made the effort to meet a farmer and find good sources to ship you frozen meat, then you can do some small things to get better quality.
That's a good point. And people sometimes look at me crazy when they bring up the topic of oxalates and anti-nutrients, because oxalate, like you mentioned, it's a lot of foods. And I want to show people some of those foods, like the nut, the peanut, the chocolate, right? So what can we do? Is there anything we can do to neutralize the oxalates in food, or we really have to cut it out?
The thing is, it's not a zero oxalate diet. This is not like celiac disease and gluten, where you have to have an orthodoxy where no oxalate touches your house or your refrigerator or your plate. It's not like that. It's like bringing down your intake to a level that your body can handle. And what level you can handle may be very personal now that you've ruined your health on releasing these old granulomas and nets and crystals and who knows what all through the body. Yeah. And probably, especially the more recent things that are less buried down deep in the bones, the more recent oxalates from the last 2 months or whatever will start flooding back into your bloodstream, which is bad. That's not good, because it's still disrupting your electrolytes. You're disrupting your levels of calcium and other electrolytes in the bloodstream. You can start getting heart arrhythmias. You'll get muscle spasms and twitches that can lead to diarrhea and constipation. You get neurological effects. It's very neurotoxic because nerves operate on little ions moving really quickly and correctly. And if you have oxalate being released from inside cells, that's where it gets especially toxic. So on the way in, it's a little less toxic than it is on the way out, because on the way out, it's coming from inside the cell. And inside the cell, you've got very careful in a healthy cell management of these little ions of calcium and other ions too, but especially calcium. Calcium is what they call, a messenger or signal molecule that communicates to the cell within itself. You need to do this. You need to make more transporters. You need to bring in some nutrients. You need to make more insulin. You need to do these things over here in this part of the cell. So in these nanoseconds, little tiny fragment of seconds, little calcium ions will pop up in one part of the cell, tell the cell membrane, oh, we need to move some ions. We can do this, do that. But if you got calcium ions moving around in the cell and you've got oxalate ions being released by the cell, you're mucking up all that cellular communication. And it messes up the cells enough that it creates a fair amount of dysfunction. So you'll get neuroinflammation, which can cause mood changes, where you get, anxious, depressed, negative, worried. The symptoms worry you more when you're neurotoxic and you're suddenly like, oh my God, where do I go? What doctor do I need? I need something. This is scary. You're having really negative thought patterns and so on. And this is part of this neuro misfiring and inflammation that can occur as the body's releasing oxalate. So you literally can create a long period of oxalate releasing and cleaning and body healing that has periods of really some degree of misery all over again. So you've got to be careful about going from a super high oxalate diet way over to a carnivore diet overnight, because carnivore is zero oxalate. And a lot of people come to carnivore from keto, which often means keto bread, keto desserts, almond this, almond that, nuts like crazy, plus spinach and spinach smoothies and protein smoothies with collagen and turmeric and these high oxalate things. Oh, that's not good. So you have to kind of back off in a sort of, so what I'm saying is keep your chocolate for a while. If you have a high oxalate food like your tea and chocolate, don't get rid of them initially. Just quit the nasty ones. Like, who really needs Swiss chard anyway? Like, quit that one first. Yeah. And then like spinach, really, did you ever really like it? Be honest. Do you have to have quinoa? Do you need bran and everything? No. Do you have to do buckwheat? No. Sesame seeds, you can live without them. How about the figs? Yeah, you can live without them. Like pick them and work down. And then you may want to keep 2 bags of tea in your morning routine every day for a while. So you keep enough oxalate to try to rein in the speed and pace with this deaccumulation process to lower the toxicity to keep you safer. We don't want you in the emergency room with heart palpitations, high blood pressure, raging pulse, and the doctor's going, well, I don't know what's wrong with you. You seem okay to me. It's not a good scene.
So is there a way to detox the body or help the body to get rid of those crystals? Or it's just a matter of time?
It's real important to not try to push it and not try to do things that promote it. Oh, I want to get it out fast. No, because you're poisoning yourself and you're stressing the vascular system. So we don't want a lot in the bloodstream because the standard thing that it creates is vasculitis, and you end up with Raynaud's syndrome and ropey veins and vascular inflammation, and it's kind of, the setup for vascular disease and vascular especially in the capillary beds. The capillary beds start falling apart and you end up with eye problems and cataracts and tissue degeneration, and you're going to need hyperbaric oxygen. You're going to need all kinds of stuff to repair that, including the low oxalate diet. So you want to let the body manage it and give the body its supports that it needs and correct the problems that this toxicity causes. So the toxicity and the release of oxalate causes a lot of metabolic acidosis. So we use citrate, we use lemon juice, and we use mineral supplements to correct the metabolic acidosis. And you can kind of tell if you feel really crummy, it's usually because there's a fair amount of acidosis occurring during these periods of toxicity. Okay. And you can check your urine pH and get a sense too how acid you are. And you can juice lemons to correct that, or take calcium citrate, magnesium citrate, potassium citrate, all the minerals that get lost, you're replacing them, but you're also adding in citrate, which is an alkalizer that dissolves crystals. So the citrate sits on the crystal faces and has an electromagnetic pull that weakens the crystal structure. So the crystals go from being little quartz bits to like chalk. And so they do break apart easier if there's a lot of citrate available. The citrate also is really important to the sturdiness of your teeth and bones for 2 reasons that I know of for sure. One is because you're correcting the acidity, and acidity causes your body to give up more calcium and so on to alkalize the blood, because it's very careful to try to keep the blood pH just perfect So the bones are always used as a resource, and it's something that it has to sacrifice to keep the heart happy and keep all the critical organs happy. The bones don't care about life if you have no kidneys or have no heart. Like there's no point in having bones if you don't have a heart and kidney. So the bones get low priority and get used a lot as an overused resource to correct that acidity. So by using the citrate, you lower acidity and give the bones one less reason to have to keep sacrificing for the cause. The other reason is because citric acid, or the citrate molecule, connects the minerals, the calcium and the other minerals that make your teeth and bone hard, to the collagen fibers, which is the inner matrix of bones and teeth. So there's collagen and minerals stuck together, but the glue that holds them together is citric acid, or citrate molecule. And so I found that all the lemons I juiced on my low oxalate diet made my teeth happier. You think of taking lemons as bad for your teeth because it's acidic, but actually, when I was doing a lot of lemons, teeth got better. I've reversed my osteopenia on a low oxalate diet where I was doing lemons, and especially it got even quicker reversal when I added in the potassium citrate. Potassium on a low oxalate diet will rebuild the bones, especially if you're taking enough calcium. And since oxalate has ruined your bones, it's a good thing to do. So to help your body, lemons or other forms of citrates are very helpful for helping the body dissolve the crystals and maintain bones and teeth, helping the kidneys deal with oxalate, very good for the kidneys. The more citrate you have in the kidneys, the less crystallization. Magnesium in the urine keeps the oxalate from being calcium oxalate. So a lot of what we're peeing out is just oxalate ions, but we also pee out magnesium oxalate, and the more magnesium oxalate we have, the less calcium oxalate we have. So the calcium is the one that makes the harder crystals that are harder to deal with, that crystallize more easily. So that's what you do. You protect your kidneys with various forms of citrates and taking enough minerals. That also helps the bones and the whole body.
Wow, I didn't know about this. Thank you. And Alex is asking, is there any benefit to oxalate?
Excuse me?
Is there any benefit to oxalate?
The saliva concentrates oxalate at a rate that's like 10 times higher than the blood. So when it's high in the blood, it's high in the saliva. And the saliva oxalate tends to form a tartar on the teeth that's a coating that's actually slightly protective to the teeth. I think it borrows calcium from the teeth, but it forms a seal on the teeth, but not a pretty seal that you really want. Nobody likes tartar on their teeth.
Yeah.
But they think that that's a protective thing, and it may be sort of a practical way to get rid of oxalate through the saliva. The same transporter that moves the bicarb into the saliva, that allows saliva to be alkaline, which is protecting your teeth from acids, right? You have an alkaline saliva. So there's transporters in the saliva glands that move bicarb that also move oxalate into the saliva. So that's actually an indicator. If you get tartar behind these lower teeth, that could be a sign that your blood oxalate levels are high.
I see. That's good to know. That's good to know. Hey, listen, it's been 40 minutes already. And like you said, we watched the topic. You're going to have to come back when the book is out. So when is your book coming out?
I think it's going to be early May. And so that seems to be the date that the publisher's promising. I haven't got any updates from that. I know they're still trying to put the final touches on the cover design and get back some edits to me. So we're still pulling the book together, but it's available for pre-order, which is important because the overall success of a book really depends on people ordering it even before it's out. So if you want to pre-order it, that's a chance of this book actually staying on the shelves and having the legs and having the reach that it needs to have, because people don't have other options for learning about this, and we really need a book like this to do well. So I really appreciate any and everybody who wants to order a couple copies ahead of time. Don't forget, your doctor needs one, your best friend needs one, your mother-in-law needs one. Too bad it won't be ready for Christmas.
Too bad, but I'm so excited. I'm looking forward to it because this is a so important topic, and I see the results every day with people who cut off those foods. They just feel better.
it's pretty convincing. I mean, especially with the ones that start spewing out oxalate crystals out of their body, it's like, whoa, that's rock solid evidence. And it's people who are taking out different oxalate foods. It's not like it's something else in the food. It becomes very clear that it's oxalate itself because it has all these oxalate characteristics like the cloudy urine and the gritty eyes and the tartar on the teeth and this. And it's so surprising that it could be diverse in its effects and diverse in the response to the diet. And yet it all fits the same pattern and all sounds like the same thing over and again. It's really interesting.
It is. And listen, I need you to come back when your book is out, like I said, because we can talk a lot more about this topic. And sorry for the delay. We got delayed about 20 minutes because of some technology issue. But it was all good. It was a good interview. So thank you for your time. I know you need to go, so I will let you go. And we'll stay in touch.
Well, thank you so much for your interest in the topic. It's really fun to chat and get to know you. Hopefully we'll keep doing this. Thank you.
Thank you.